Before you start, sorry, I will say that I didn't get a chance to read through Tyler's points for rebuttal, but I'll get it done before tomorrow.
All right, we ready to start?
Yep, we are currently recording.
Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our debate discussing the use of restraints and seclusion for people with autism and other developmental disabilities. My name is Jillian Birch, and I will be acting as the moderator for this debate and introducing our topic and group members. Presenting today, we have the pro stater and prover, Liz Westerhoff, the pro attacker, Tyler Morelli, the con stater and prover, Selena Hamilton, and the con attacker, Regina Pilen. The use of restraints and seclusion has increasingly become a controversial issue in the education and mental health fields. Individuals with autism and other disabilities may engage in aggressive or disruptive behavior that is unsafe to themselves or others. These behaviors often yield extreme measures such as restraints and seclusion. Labelle et al. 2012 provide us with definitions of restraint and seclusion. Restraint is defined as any manual method or device used to restrict freedom or movement. Seclusion is defined as involuntary confinement of a person to a room or area from which a person is physically prevented from leaving. Debate members will discuss the use of restraints and seclusions, the impact of these interventions on clients and staff, and the use of restraints and seclusions in school settings. Relevant BACB compliance codes addressed in this debate are as follows. 1.05e, professional and scientific relationships. 3.01a, behavior analytic assessment. 4.03a, individualized behavior change programs. 4.08, considerations regarding punishment procedures. 4.09, least restrictive procedures. And 7.01, promoting an ethical culture. Members will present their case regarding the pros and cons of these issues to produce defensible arguments. Each stater will have 3 minutes, and each attacker will have 2 minutes to present.
First, we will be watching a video that shows how a seclusion room works in a public school.
Child is in crisis. They're in the room. The adult has full eyes. You never want a room so big that you can't ever see where the child is. And you have to, in our guidelines, the adult must have eyes on the child at all times. And you can hold this closed. But this latch here will secure the door so that if the child's pushing on the door here, that the door's not then opening up on the adult on the other side. But it also ensures that the adult remains standing here with full eyes on the child to make sure that that child is safe. If you release it and go someplace else, the child is allowed to come out, which is a good thing.
Now we will watch a video that shows a physical restraint.
Today, Sarah, who is my daughter, who's 8 years old, is going to help me demonstrate the children's control position. Sarah's going to pretend to be an aggressive student, okay? And one of the things that we have to do when a student is aggressive is get control of their arms. And how we do that, we need to get behind the aggressive student. And the first way to do that is do a technique called a pull through. So I'm going to reach out and grab one of her arms from the outside, pull her in front of me. So the next thing I need to get control of her arms, and I need to cross her arm around her waist, okay? Once I do that, then I transfer it to my other hand, reach down, locate the other arm, cross them around her waist area, and slide her arms up underneath her elbows, locked. And then I want to tilt her back on her heels. One of the reasons we want to make sure that we're locked underneath the elbows is to prevent her from slipping or dropping. Also, so if she's like this, she can drop. Go ahead and drop, Sarah. If she drops, we're going to release. Okay, go ahead and stand up, Sarah. And if Sarah's not aggressive, we're going to stop there. But if she continues to be aggressive, we're going to go back into the children's control position. Okay, wrap the arm around the waist, transfer it to the other hand, locate the other arm, cross at the waist, slide, lock underneath the elbows, up high on the chest. One of the other reasons is to make sure that it's locked underneath the elbows, up high on the chest, is to make sure that it doesn't injure her shoulders. If I'm having it like this, her shoulders can be injured at this point. So I'm going to make sure that she's safely positioned and controlled, up high on the chest, and lean back towards me. Now she wants to drop, try to drop Sarah. She cannot drop, and I've got control of her. Okay, go ahead and stand up. And I'm going to maintain this position as long as she's physically out of control. Once she's back under control, I'm going to release her, and it's done with. So we'll demonstrate that one more time.
Liz will begin our discussion on the use of restraints in seclusion.
Hello. So we believe that the use of restraint and seclusion is necessary. It's especially necessary to prevent harm to clients and others. And the use of restrictive measures can reduce serious harmful behaviors. Again, using restraints and seclusion can prevent injury to clients and others, such as staff and peers in schools and other settings. Restraints and seclusions are necessary to use with individuals with autism and other developmental disorders who exhibit severe behaviors such as significant aggression towards others, significant self-injurious behavior, and elopement, which is running away, which can be very dangerous if it includes a situation such as running towards a busy road. Some studies have shown that clients have preferences about the restrictive measures used to address their challenging behavior. Research by Fisher in 1994 found that seclusion poses less of a threat of harm than physical restraints. There's also some other positives related to using restraint and seclusion that people might not traditionally think about. For example, physical restraints and seclusion may decrease the use of medications, which can cause the body damage over time. Again, medications can be considered chemical restraints, but using seclusion and physical restraints can eliminate some of the damage that can be done by these medications. The use of restrictive measures can also result in calmness following challenging behavior and agitation. So ultimately, when necessary, the use of restraint and seclusion should be used and is necessary to ensure safety to the clients, to peers, and to staff.
Okay, thank you. And Selena will present her case.
There are so many more positive approaches that can be used to reduce the need for restraint and seclusion when these challenging behaviors arise. With restraints and seclusion, there comes an increased risk of injury and physical harm that can happen to all parties involved in the restraint or seclusion. This increased risk and danger can be devastating or even deadly in some cases to those involved. Prone positioning or face down positioning, for example, is a dangerous physical restraint in that it can restrict the airways of the individual that's being restrained. Seclusion can be dangerous, say an individual who has a history of self-injurious behaviors. If they're left alone, unsupervised, that could lead to some serious consequences. Chemical restraints can also be detrimental to the health of the individuals. They can be harmful to the organs, and after long-term use can have life-shortening effects on individuals taking them. Generally, staff are maintaining physical restraints until the clients demonstrate the behavior that indicates that they are calm, in control, and ready to release. In a study in 2008 by Louise Selly and colleagues, they targeted aggressive behavior in adolescents with intellectual disabilities and tested the effects of fixed time release fading procedures to reduce the amount of time spent in physical restraints. These procedures proved to be effective for a 13-year-old boy with severe aggression and intellectual disabilities, and ultimately resulted in the successful elimination of the physical restraints used entirely. This procedure involved gradually decreasing the amount of time that the student was in physical restraint, starting at 60 seconds, dropping it to 30, 15, and then 7. But unfortunately, there's not any more research that discusses this approach to be helpful in eliminating or taking down the number of physical restraints or time spent in them. There was a study done by WIT in 2007 in a mental health facility that looked at raising their treatment standards by reducing the amount of seclusion and restraints used in their facility. Their child and adolescence program was increasing in time that seclusion and restraints were used, so they began there. They started by making sure that treatment plans were individualized and used on a daily basis. Staff were taught how to handle crisis situations with verbal skills, with the last resort being restraints or seclusion. Caregivers were encouraged to notify psychiatrists if their attitude or behavior changes, allowing the staff to be proactive in their as-needed medication giving. Before the crisis situation, staff collaborated quickly and briefly just to make sure they were on the same page and knew the plan for the student. Routines and structure were adjusted for and more flexible to offer more choices for the individuals, giving them a little bit more power. And staff were encouraged to reflect and debrief afterwards to do better the next time. After implementing these verbal training skills and strategies, the unit saw positive outcomes, including 76 consecutive days restraint and seclusion free, and there was no increase in staff injuries or as needed multiple medication given, something that the staff felt was pretty impossible to do.
Okay, thank you. And Tyler will present his case next.
Restraint and seclusion is no longer used as a form of punishment or intimidation, which may have been the case in the past. This goes along with the Ethical Code 4.08a, which states that behavior analysts recommend reinforcement rather than punishment whenever possible. The use of restraint and seclusion is mainly to reduce the risk of injury to the client and others. And when we look at Compliance Code 1.05e, it states that behavior analysts do not knowingly engage in behavior that is harassing or demeaning. By following this, we can assume that the only use of restraints and seclusion being suggested by behavior analysts is for the good of the individual in crisis. When we look at the literature, almost all the studies that have been conducted have used restraint and seclusion solely as a way to keep clients safe from self-injury or to prevent others from being injured as a result of aggression towards others. It's up to the team to decide what intensity of self-injury or aggression warrants the use of restraint and seclusion, but it should never be used as a form of punishment. There are situations when restraints and seclusion are absolutely necessary to keep the individual and others safe. Studies have shown the use of restraint and seclusion assist in providing staff a safe place and a way for individuals in crisis situations to become calm before returning to previous activity or environments. So the main point is getting rid of the use of restraint and seclusion simply can't happen due to the safety concerns involving the individuals we work with and the unpredictability that we see.
Thank you. And Regina will now present her case.
Positive approaches should be used to address challenging behaviors rather than restraints and seclusion. It's important to remember that restraint and seclusion can intensify challenging behaviors. From the study done by WIT in 2007, it was found that when restraints and seclusion are necessary to implement for safety reasoning, the use of effective crisis prevention intervention training can reduce the likelihood of restrictive measures being implemented. Effective training can help staff work closer as a team, and they think more creatively about using other approaches and have increased their confidence in their ability to de-escalate situations using verbal skills. It's also important to redefine last resort and make sure restrictive measures are only being used when 100% necessary. Also, if clients are able to partake in the development of intervention plans, it helps them feel more involved in the planning process, and the clients are able to help pick best interventions for their needs. Also, patients were more self-directed in calming themselves and managing aggressive feelings. It's important to keep in mind the ethical codes of the pursuit of excellence, treating others with care and compassion, and accepting accountability. Behavior analysts should always be in line with the Ethical Code 4.09 to recommend the least restrictive procedures that are deemed effective for that individual. And behavior analysts should also adhere to 4.08, considerations regarding punishment procedures, and prioritize the inclusion of reinforcement-based procedures before using punishment procedures, along with effective training, supervision, and oversight.
Okay, Liz and Selena will each provide a final statement regarding this issue.
Again, the use of restraint and seclusion is necessary. Based on the compliance codes, we do need to make sure to treat our clients with care and compassion, and we do need to make sure to do no harm. But some clients exhibit severe aggressive behavior and self-injurious behavior. So as similar to what Tyler said, restraint and seclusion is not being used as a treatment, and hopefully the rest of their education is coming in the form of the least restrictive environment. But to ensure safety to clients, to staff, and to other peers, restraint and seclusion cannot be completely ruled out and is necessary and can be done safely, ethically, and effectively.
There are still so many other strategies that can be used in place of restraint and seclusion. When you look at the codes, as Tyler stated, 4.08a, as a staff, how do we know how much positive reinforcement and different reinforcement strategies have been used, and at what point we result to these punishment procedures in the form of restraint and seclusion? And at what point do we know that we have crossed the line into harassment and demeaning behavior as staff and as support people in these individuals' lives? There just needs to be so many more strategies used in place of restraint and seclusion, and there are a number of them that can be used successfully.
Okay, thank you for your thoughts. Liz will now begin with the next topic, the impact of restraints and seclusion on clients and staff.
Restraints and seclusion can positively impact clients and other stakeholders, such as the use of restrictive measures has shown a reduction in psychological stressors and injury to clients, which is very important. Also, the use of restraint and seclusion can lead to a reduction in agitation and prevent injury, as found in research by Fisher in 1994. Again, anxiety and fear levels can also be lessened with the use of restraint and seclusion. So ultimately, restrictive measures help clients calm down, as was discussed in research conducted by Vishvanek and his colleagues in 2013. In another study conducted by Marianu, Coate, and Marin in 2014, there were no mention of abusive practices. So in the study, interviews were conducted, and in the study, during both interviews with clients and with staff who had exhibited the restraint and seclusion, there were no mention of abusive practices by either parties. Again, some positive perceptions have been mentioned by clients who have experienced the use of restraint and seclusion. That same study by Marianu, Coate, and Marin in 2014 found that some clients appear to understand the purpose of the restraint and seclusion measures, and that they reported that the restrictive measures helped them calm down. Also, staff who participated in the study also thought their clients understood the use of the restrictive measures. One of the positive impacts, the positive impact on staff perceptions has been reported in research studies recently. Some staff members report feeling reassured due to the reduced risk of aggression, and others report feeling safer. Again, injuries to clients is of major concern when implementing restraints and seclusion, but only 2 staff members mentioned witnessing injuries in that research by Marianu, Coate, and Marin. from the result of restraints. Also, the use of mechanical restraint with the client to prevent aggressive behavior increased the frequency of contact between the staff member and the client. So the staff member reported this being a positive impact of the use of the restraints. Other staff members also felt that the restrictive measures can have a positive impact on their relationship with the client if a debriefing protocol is implemented after the use of the restraint and the seclusion. Debriefing sessions can help individuals with disabilities better understand the purpose and goal of the measures being implemented. And crisis prevention intervention training can also lead to a positive impact on staff as they feel more confident in their implementation of the restrictive measures.
Okay, thank you. And up next, Selena will present her case.
The use of restraints and seclusion can negatively impact both individuals who receive and apply the measures, even in crisis management situations. According to a study done by Marino, Cote, and Morin in 2014, these impacts include potential physical injury to either party, as well as psychological repercussions such as distress, anxiety, anger, and fear. Seclusion can lead to psychiatric symptoms similar to those experienced in inmates in solitary confinement, such as hypersensitivity and hallucinations. When asked about their experience in seclusion, a large percentage of participants reported feelings of fear, estrangement, hostility, guilt, and paranoia. According to a study by Fisher in 1994, clients often don't understand why they're being placed in seclusion or restraints, and often reported that they are unaware that someone was checking in on them. Some clients feel as though restrictive measures are used more often, even though a less restrictive measure could be used with the same effect. As an alternative to restrictive measures, clients suggest improving communication with their service providers, using medication as a chemical restraint, and implementing self-strategies such as discussing feelings or spending time alone in a room. These measures were perceived as less intrusive to the clients than the seclusion and restraint measures that have been used. You discussed that the staff feel reassured using the restrictive procedures, but according to the same study by Marianu, Cote, and Morin, staff also felt uncomfortable implementing the restrictive measures and can experience psychological distress in doing so. They are found to be stressful, and the measures lead them to feel guilty, saddened, and many report superficial injuries.
Okay, thank you. And up next, Tyler will present his case.
So when you talk about the adverse feelings of individuals that are having about the restraint and seclusion, is it possible that the clients are already feeling these things before the restraint or seclusion has begun? With the proper training, restraint seclusion should really be a calming method used only in a small number of situations. What you're describing with the feelings of the individuals and the staff sounds like they've been kept in restraints and seclusion for a long amount of time instead of the short seclusions and restraints that should be used. I'd like to go back to the article that Liz mentioned, the Marino, Cote, and Morin article. That discussed individuals' perceptions of the use and effectiveness of the restrictive measures may depend on the attitudes and behaviors of staff involved in the application and of the restrictive measure, and as well as the quality of care that was provided by them. In the research, 70% of 50 participants reported that they would rather be put in seclusion than in physical restraint, and that the seclusion room proved to be less threatening to them. Adolescents also reported that it took a longer time to reach a calm state in physical restraint than in a seclusion. The majority of individuals felt that seclusion rooms provided a sense of improvement in their mental state. Of the 50 participants, 44% felt the seclusion room resulted in a major improvement in their mental state, and 30% felt at least some improvement in their mental state.
Thank you. And next, Regina will present her case.
Ultimately, however you want to paint it, restraints and seclusions do negatively impact clients. Clients often perceive the situation negatively, feeling they were being punished. They feel angry towards the staff or lose trust in the care providers. which negatively impacts the staff members and the client's relationship, according to the same article, Renew and Coate from 2014. As we discussed, clients have preferences for less restrictive alternative interventions, which they believe will help with their behavior. But service providers do not acknowledge that self-strategies may be useful in reducing aggressive behaviors and may therefore limit their use. And also the opportunities to exercise personal control over that situation. This clearly violates the ethical principles of according dignity, to do no harm, treating others with care and compassion, and accepting accountability. The compliance codes in violation here are codes 4.03a, individualized behavior change programs, and code 3.01a, behavior analytic assessments. Behavior analysts should be conducting functional assessments in order to develop behavior reduction programs that fit the individual client's needs and consent. Behavior reduction programs should be formulated around the goals of each client and unique to their own needs.
Liz and Selena will each provide a final statement regarding these issues.
So based on the information that we've all been talking about, there are opposing views about the impacts on client and staff. But again, to piggyback off what Tyler said, the restraint and seclusion should not be used as a treatment. It should be used in those rare extreme cases where it's going to help the client calm down, address the challenging behavior, and again, reach a state of calm. It seems like a lot of the issues that are related to the negative impacts are related to maybe ineffective training, lack of training, and staff members that are not treating their clients with care and compassion. So again, if you accord their dignity and you treat them with care and compassion, there can be positive impacts to the clients and the staff when implementing restraint and seclusion, especially because staff feel safer and it helps clients reach calm and end that challenging behavior episode.
These impacts of restraint and seclusion are nothing to take lightly. They vary from individual to from one individual to another. It is so important to make sure that these individualized behavior plan programs that Regina was talking about are in place for each person and utilize all reinforcement procedures before the very last resort, resulting in the punishment procedures. The anxiety, fear, and guilt are harmful to the individuals that feel these as a result of the restraint and seclusion procedures. And it is our duty to keep the individuals from feeling this way and putting all procedures into place that can result in behavior change, positive behavior change, other than the use of restraint and seclusion.
Okay, up next, Liz will begin with the final topic, the use of restraints and seclusions in school settings.
Restraints and seclusions can be used effectively in school settings in response to students' severe challenging behavior under the right condition. The main issue is that appropriate action plans are necessary to address the challenging behavior in school. So in response to IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, there has been an increase in the number of students in public schools with more intensive behavior support needs, as discussed in research by Trader and his colleagues in 2017. Again, when public schools develop appropriate action plans that include effective staff trainings and protocols, having the ability to use the restrictive measures in these settings promotes the inclusion of students with disabilities, which addresses the mandate of free and appropriate public education outlined in IDEA. Also, there has been an increase in safety and new regulations. So with proper adherence to these techniques and with parental approval in the event that crisis planning and de-escalation efforts fail, then restraint and seclusion measures can be appropriately implemented as a life safety measure of last resort to maintain the safety of students, peers, and staff. So addressed in research by LaBelle, Nuno, Moore, and O'Halloran in 2012, it discussed the federal bill that has been proposed to establish national minimum standards for restraint and seclusion use in school. And these standards have been endorsed by more than 100 organizations. So the standards prohibit schools from using restrictive measures that restrict breathing and aversive behavioral interventions that compromise health and safety. Also, they prohibit the use of restraint and seclusion unless the student's behavior poses an imminent danger of physical injury to the student or others. And also requires that the measures are implemented by school personnel trained and certified by a crisis intervention training program, and that the standards require that the measures immediately end when the conditions that led to the implementation of the restraint or the seclusion conclude. Also, the seclusionary experience in school can be improved by staff keeping in frequent contact with the individual in seclusion, as well as debriefing with the individual after a calm state has been reached. So constructive team planning on how to better approach the situation in the future if a similar situation arises is beneficial, and they will figure out a new way to approach the problem in the future.
Okay, and up next, Selena will present her case.
Although all students have the right to a free and appropriate public education, some public schools don't have the access to the effective and appropriate protocols needed to address the intensity of these challenging behaviors. With IDEA laws, the level of significant emotional and behavioral needs and the needs for students to be in their least restrictive environment, combined with the lack of support and training and the use of restraints and seclusion in schools, there is going to be a rise in the ineffectiveness of schools and these procedures. According to Trader et al. In 2017, our schools are in a place for misapplication and abuse of these procedures by inappropriately using the measures to address behaviors that are not emergencies and not last resort. These restrictive measures are being implemented inappropriately, and the treatment or behavior or implemented as treatment or behavior interventions, while increasing the risk of injuries and the harms to students, peers, and staff, potentially intensifying the challenging behavior and using the procedures in the absence of a systematic and comprehensive functional assessment and support plan. As of 2012, according to LaBelle, Nuno, Moore, and O'Halloran, 41% of states have no laws, policies, or guidelines governing the restraint and seclusion and its use in the schools. And only 45% of states require or recommend that schools notify the parents and guardians if the procedures are used throughout the day. Nearly 90% of the states allow their schools to use procedures such as the prone procedure, which is a face-down physical restraint, that are not allowed in other settings that service these individuals with disabilities. These other settings don't allow these due to the risk of physical harm. There are laws in place to protect children from restraint and seclusion abuse in mental health settings, but not in schools. This is not right.
Okay, and up next, Tyler will present his case.
So the effective use of restraint and seclusion in public schools has been documented in the research. A public school identified as exemplar district focused on developing effective behavioral support to decrease the use of restrictive measures by using a variety of strategies to support students with difficult, challenging behaviors. Most of the students with the challenging behaviors received education within the general education setting. There are very few, if any, students were served in a separate school placement. In that study, it's stated that in a 3-year span, only 16 students were involved in the use of restraint or seclusion. And following the lead provided by Exemplar District, the use of restraint and seclusion can be rare and only responding to threats of safety. Of course, crisis situations will continue to arise occasionally in public school settings, but the school can be properly prepared to address these situations with effective policies, training, and with support of evidence-based strategies and research-validated practices. Of course, we want to use the least restrictive procedures possible, which is a part of Ethical Code 4.09. but there are times that warrant the use of restraint and seclusion. Does that mean that we need to kick these students out of the public school and place them into a specialized school when, with a little bit of training and an small increase in the school budget, schools could handle the occasional use of restraint and seclusion?
Regina will now present her case.
Schools that use restraint and seclusion procedures are at a higher risk of misapplication and abuse of the procedures due to many factors, as discussed earlier by Selena. Students who require additional assistance to address their challenging behaviors through behavior intervention plans and in crisis situations will benefit more when attending a school setting that specializes in their needs. These education settings are more likely to employ highly qualified staff with better access to appropriate training. Research has found that the use of physical restraint is related to the number of years of experience of the main support worker of the participant. Also, it has been shown that the more experience the support worker had, the less physical restraint was used, which will allow the student to learn in the least restrictive environment possible, which is what we all want. These issues are important because of the ethical principles of the pursuit of excellence amongst service providers and accepting accountability for practice amongst the staff. The BACB compliance codes in violation here are 7.01 to promote an ethical culture, where service providers make others aware of the codes of acceptable conduct, and Code 1.05E, professional and scientific relationships, for behavior analysts to not knowingly engage in behavior that is demeaning to persons based on factors such as disability, despite the amount of experience they might have working with special needs population, which could occur if you put a child in a restraint or seclusion in a school setting.
Okay, and Liz and Selena will each present a final statement regarding these issues.
Restraint and seclusion has been shown and can be effective as a last resort in a public school setting. So we are providing the students the opportunity to learn in the least restrictive environment when they are in the public school setting, they are with their peers. And they are allowed to learn there because the staff members have the appropriate training and appropriate action plans to address the severe challenging behavior episodes that they might experience at public school. Again, there should be national standards. There needs to be proper techniques, there needs to be consent, and staff really do need to be trained, but it has been shown that they can be trained and that they can effectively implement these restrictive measures in public school settings to give students with disabilities that chance of being educated in the public school.
Schools are not set up for the support or staff training that is needed in order to properly address the situations that arise with the use of restraint and seclusion. Schools need additional training in order to comply with the Ethical Code 4.09. Less time and money should be spent on enhancing the inappropriate use of restraint and seclusion, and more money and training should be spent on properly implementing alternative strategies. As Regina stated, there is a direct correlation between the high levels of experience and training of the service providers and the decrease in the use of restraints and seclusion. This is the appropriate training that is needed for the potential challenging behavior that is so often resulting poorly in restraining seclusion procedures.
We will now, sorry.
Oh, I have to remember that in the thing.
We will now watch a video that shows how restrictive measures are used in schools in a news report.
Controversial. So I just created this dope website with Wix. Let me show you how I did it. First up, we were just talking about this moments ago, school seclusion space.
Yeah, tomorrow a big decision is going to be made on using these type of rooms in Ohio schools anyway. And some districts like Cincinnati don't have these at all. Others, though, as News Source John London found out tonight, they swear by them.
There was a time when simply riding a school bus would have been way too chancy for it.
Tremendous meltdowns. yelling, kicking, screaming, cussing, hitting.
But Matthew Jones, who has autism and is now 12 years old, has learned to recognize his emotions and, just as important, his response to them.
A couple of years ago, I'm different now since I am pretty much a nice kid now. I've grown up, I'm a young kid, and I'm doing my good work, and now I'm not getting not punching no more.
He has been in seclusion rooms, as they are sometimes called, and although his school in Fairfield chose to not show us the space,
for students that have identification of emotional disturbance.
The Lakota District believes transparency is needed in the discussion about what critics call solitary.
If you can see inside,
This is padded.
it's padded based on student safety.
Lakota's Special Services Director emphasizes this room is not used as discipline, but as direction. A beanbag chair is the only item inside today.
The door may be open, the student may walk in, and that just may be their chill space.
Up to 8 students with special needs are in this classroom at times. About once a week so far this year, the small room adjoining the classroom is utilized.
Significant acting out behaviors where they could be a harm to themselves or others. And in that situation, we may decide that maybe shutting the door would be, for safety reasons, what we would do.
Okay, so let's say we shut the door and I'm in there. You monitor me now constantly?
I can see what's going on through here.
In Matthew's experience, the benefit is no day-long break in learning. Seclusion supporters say once self-calming occurs, the positive reinforcement of remixing with peers is a step forward.
The alternative is
Thank you, debate members, for presenting your thoughts on this issue. Today, we have discussed the use of restraints and seclusions, the impact of these interventions on clients and staff, and the use of restraints and seclusions in school settings. Highlighted points from today's debate include the injury, harm, and risk of restraints on clients, addressing challenging behaviors through restraints and seclusion, client and staff perceptions, including both positive and negative views, restrictive measures within the school systems, and alternate ways to address problem behavior. Implications for BCBAs include adherence to the core ethical principles and compliance codes, proper reporting of misconduct and abuse, and appropriate training protocols that lead to successful and effective implementation of restrictive measures in a variety of settings. As a group, we feel that the use of restraint and seclusion is necessary for problem behavior for individuals with autism and other developmental disabilities, given proper training and adhering to the compliance codes and ethical core principles. Above all else, clients should be treated in the least restrictive environment possible, and adherence to the ethical compliance codes should be a priority when integrating restraints and seclusions to address problem behavior. This concludes today's debate, and we thank you all for watching.
I feel like that was really good.